Um, Hi everyone, I'm Anjchita B. Nair. I'm co-founder and COO of Culture. Welcome to this talk series by Center for Museums, where we will be talking about different topics related to museum sector once every month. Today, I'm delighted to have with us architect Siddhant Shah. He is an accessibility expert and founder of Access for All, an organization that aims at creating inclusive cultural experiences for all. He is featured by National Geographic as Changemaker 2022. He's the youngest recipient of the National Award, Emphasis Universal Design Award 2017 by the National Committee on Rights for People with Disabilities. Along with his global consultation practice, he is currently the Access Consultant to the British Council India and for the Pradhan Mantri Sangralaya Government of India. Shah was awarded a position to represent India at the British Museum International Program as well. Welcome, Siddhant. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for this invitation. And I think it's very interesting to do this talk because I think more awareness needs to be created around this topic of inclusion in the museum, right, so that everyone can enjoy and be part of our rich culture and heritage. Absolutely. So thank you for doing this.
Right. I think you wanted to kickstart this session with a video. So why don't you just go into that?
Sure. So as she mentioned, I will be sharing a video. Recently, National Geography did a documentary on me, and I just thought this would be an interesting way to give an idea of what we do so that we can then focus more on questions. If there are any questions that you want, please ask over here. I am doing this, but slightly I had an accident yesterday, so I'm just a bit on medication, so I will be a bit drowsy, but I've tried to wash my face and I've put myself up in a position. So please bear with me on that. But otherwise, I'm more than happy to take any questions and happy to answer them even after the event. So please allow me to share my screen.
Are you able to do it?
Is it visible?
Yes, I think it's starting.
Yeah, I've made a full screen of it. Can you see it in a full screen mode?
Yes.
Okay. My love for visual art began very early. As a family, we all would love to go to museums, heritage sites, monuments. But when my mother acquired visual impairment, that became a turning point in my life to explore the area of making culture and heritage more inclusive, more accessible for persons with visual impairment. I am Siddhant Shah. I am the founder of Access for All. Access for All aims at bridging the gap between cultural heritage and disability around the world. For those who are visually impaired, to experience the objects, it is imperative to create things in a three-dimensional format where they can touch, they can feel and understand the textures that are there, the materials that were used, the techniques that were explored to creating these particular artifacts. Typically in a museum you find a signage that says please do not touch, and our tactile artworks have this sign that reads in Braille and English that says please touch. The most important thing is to conduct heritage walks so that we also create a culture amongst them to come to a space like a museum. Our understanding of disability is only about the visual disability. There is also invisible disability. It could be dementia, it could be autism. In schools, along with art therapy, we engage in hand-eye coordination, body movement as an element of well-being. Children with special needs have a lot of pent-up energy. art therapy is one way of channelizing that energy in a constructive manner. And based on our experience, children who had a certain destructive approach to things, who had immediate levels of anger, it has come down drastically. We have been able to create at least the first inroad towards accessibility in our country and around the world. My mother became a catalyst in this change. I have been able to create multiple spaces which she could engage with, and along with her, many people could do so.
Thank you, Siddhant, for that.
Yes.
That gives us a good glimpse into what you've been trying to do and how you started. Actually, let's go back to the basics. Usually, most often, the installation and availability of wheelchair or a ramp in a museum is seen as a symbol of accessibility. What does it truly mean to be an accessible museum? Let's start with that.
So I think that's because of two reasons. Like the reason I also got into this domain is because while I was studying architecture, we used to have this elective of universal design, and having a parent with a disability really excited me because I thought I could learn about things that I could immediately apply, make the space, and my mother acquired a disability. She was not born with it, or like she acquired like around 35, 40 years of like being in the same house, and suddenly that space becomes inaccessible. Right. And our idea, and I thought that we would be learning so much about it, but sadly we were only taught about wheelchair accessible bathroom, wheelchair accessible ramps, corridors, parking, and the lift requirement, or like the mobility, the turning radius. And that's where our understanding of disability just ends, and that too in education. Imagine like there are more than 10 lakh architects that are graduating every year around the country. And if this is a level of education, particularly for universal design, we're coming out with a very constructed idea of what disability requirements are. And hence the whole discussion about invisible disability goes out. I was conducting an accessibility audit, and that is what we've been doing with various different museums or build spaces. And while that was on, I had a live example of I think it's an attitudinal barrier. I would not say like somebody was insensitive, but a janitor got really mad at me and saying that, "आप कैसे चला गया wheelchair bathroom के अंदर? ये तुम्हारे लिए थोड़ी ना, तुम तो चल सकता है." And that understanding that we only think that the wheelchair accessible bathroom is for only that person. It can be used by anyone if they have anxiety. It is a space to accommodate yourself in a space. Like, there are people who have spatial construct and a challenge to move around in those areas. And that's where this is a live example of our idea about disability, that it is designed for them. I have seen some really beautiful signages on toilets around, in the UK and other places where it reads over there, not all disabilities are visible. We welcome all. Like, it was just a sign, but that, anyone and everyone could use that space. You don't have to design a big door for a big cat and a small door for a small cat. Right. And sadly, our understanding, like you ask a school child to draw something about handicap, and the first thing that they'll draw is that wheelchair sign. Right. That's also because that is what we are attuned to seeing, or we've been only speaking about that, or we associated. There is no other visual language around these concepts, right? So I think that is one of the major reasons why our understanding of accessibility only stops at physical one. Like yesterday, I fell off and I had to go for an MRI. It was so difficult for me because like it was a fresh injury, and like could not move. They picked me up in a plastic chair, and like imagine like the MRI center is on the first floor, and it was like, but we asked them, they're like, नहीं हमने कभी सोचा नहीं था कोई अगर गिरेगा भी आ सकता है MRI के लिए. मतलब the whole idea is that you would just walk into a space and you would have a medical facility on first floor or a second floor. It is a challenging thing. It is not an easy aspect. So I think that is one of the reasons why our idea of accessibility only sticks around that. And second, it also goes to the education system, right? Like, do we see our schools where we have like other fellow students who are inclusive? Like, how many of us come out of a school where you grew up with friends with disability, you know, like that you had within the school who studied in your classroom? So I think all these elements become extremely important to look at culture, to look at tourism. And because you don't provide for it, then it becomes a chicken and egg situation that koi aata nahi hai, to hum kyun de? And the people who are there, they say that there is nothing for us, so hence we don't go in there.
Absolutely.
So I think, yeah, that's the reason why our idea construct of accessibility is only stuck to a wheelchair access point at this time.
But what do you think museums can do? Like, how do they, I mean, what can they do to sort of change their perception about it? And at least, take the first step, if not sort of,
So one thing that we are really advocating, so with museums, is that when museums appoint us as their accessibility consultants, we work across three key elements. One is making their spaces more accessible, looking at the spatial construct that if you want to bring in people, then your space needs to have that kind of lighting, it needs to have that sort of sound, it needs to have all those elements. Like we have a checklist of elements that you would have to make your space more accessible. Then second is also about the attitudinal behavioral element, right? Of again, citing an example of what happened with me. We were working for an art festival and we said that we will be bringing everybody in the space, and the curator, the director, everyone was very keen, and we arranged for a group to visit. They were all hearing impaired and they were going to come with their sign language interpreter. And when they were going to come there, like we had arranged everything, we just asked them that please come through the entry point and we'll usher you inside, and there will be somebody waiting over there and they will get you in. But at the entry point, the guard stopped them and asked them that क्या तुम सच्ची में बह रहे हो क्या, तुमने मशीन तो नहीं डाला है?
Oh my God.
So that is, so your curator may be completely sensitive, aware, but it has to go down to the ground level. It has to be your first point of interaction. One has to look at like all different points where you would be interacting with the person. And that was a huge thing. Like they made a big deal about it. Like because we were accessibility consultants, we were pulled into it, and hence we have now decided that wherever we go, we would definitely make sure that we do these kind of sensitization programs with them. And I think this can be very easily tackled if we start even hiring people with disability. I am still yet to see a museum in our country. Like I know there is one or two private museums who are trying to do it, but like I don't see any museum in a country that has a position of a museum accessibility consultant, right? Or consultants are there, sorry, but a museum accessibility officer.
Right.
As consultants, we go and work with various different museums, but we only spend like 2 or 3 days a month, or like depending on our consultation period. But if you had somebody who was working with you, who was on ground, on your site, then many problems would be solved because you have somebody who has a lived experience.
Right.
So that has been something that we also very strongly follow, and in Access for All, that our team consists of people with various abilities, and we make sure that whatever is designed passes through them because they know the right way of doing it. And we've extensively been working on digital accessibility, and that's the third point that you can look at. We did the entire proofreading of this website architecture, and we were like, oh, this is perfectly fine. And from our side, we approved it, and then we sent it across to our team that is of groups of people with various different visual impairment. And one person who was born blind, he said that बाकी सब तो बराबर fit हो रहा है, we can hear it on our screen reader access. But sadly, I'm continuously hearing this one word that comes and says that here you can see this, here you can see that, and this is. And so, it was not about only making the content accessible, but writing the content also in an accessible manner became an important thing. So that's where we changed the word to explore. We changed the context of how you're writing and we also changed the way we were writing our audio guide, because then the audio guide doubled up for a guide, not only for those who could see, but also those who would like to touch, feel, and experience.
Right.
So I think these are three key areas where one can, look at making museums more inclusive, more accessible. Where and now with COVID, it has taught us that it has actually given all of us a crash course in digital medium. So I think digital medium is going to be around, and that's a brilliant way of reaching out to people. If they can't come to your museum, your
Right.
website can definitely reach out to them.
No, you're right. I mean, even we as Center for Museum, we did not think about having in our social media description of what is, it displayed. That's a very good point that, we sort of missed out on. And I think we should in our captions, which people have done, and
Sure.
we should start following that.
Also while we are doing talks like these, like it would really be interesting to, like, if this talk was signed, you're talking about accessibility, but how many elements of accessibility are we following over here? Like considering this is also a medium. So right now, like, so what we do is when we are also working with museums and all, we have a process of even a digital interface is accessible. And because we all are, if you all are using Zoom on your laptop, if you go on the right hand side corner, on the left hand side corner, you see this green shield over there. And if you click on that green shield, you can see the settings tab, a small gear on that. And agar aapne us pe click kiya, to the last tab that opens up is for accessibility. And you can have your captions and anything that you want provided to you in the size that you feel comfortable. Agar aapko size chota chahiye, size bada chahiye, तो आप उसको भी use कर सकते. So I think these are the elements that, if incorporated, it makes the discourse also inclusive and accessible.
Right.
Because more or less it is not about the space, or like it is about providing the right infrastructure. Because if you don't,
I think you're on mute for some reason. You've gone on mute. Yeah.
I just wanted to simulate an experience that it's only about the infrastructure. If the infrastructure is in place, you can all understand. And suddenly you change your approach of trying to tell me that how I'm gone on mute, because considering that I was not able to hear you. So
Yeah.
how we also suddenly move to lip reading. Like, so these are very simple things, but these are ways in which, accessibility can be made a part of it. Like as the talk suggests, it's about the sensitivity with which you would create something, which, with which you make elements available in the space. I think if that is there, a lot of things can be solved.
Right. And, it's just because we spoke about digital media, one of my questions was regarding that. What issues should be considered when using social media or audio visual or new technologies for inclusion and accessibility in museums?
A lot of museums immediately picked up, the elements of like going on social media. Suddenly that social media intern, the poor 22-year, 25-year-old intern became one of the most important person during the COVID.
Yeah.
And that suddenly you start seeing so many like job descriptions and advertisements coming out from museums. Social media content creator required somebody for social media, and suddenly that's the space you understand. But also when we try to do things, which are really interesting on the digital medium space, we forget the idea that we are still in a country where having internet in the rural parts, or in the second tier, third tier city, is still difficult to find. You may find it in areas, but that sorry, 1 minute. That concept of reaching to the lowest part of the strata is missing. Where if they have access to it, is it available? Like for example, even if you create content, right? Ab kaun si language mein kar rahe ho? 5 years ago, there was a show at NGMA, and that was on Dhurandhar, and like talking about his oeuvre of work. And we realized that the show was happening only in one language. And we started doing Marathi walks. We paired up with someone we call Abhiruchi Oak, and she really helped us with the whole element of accessibility. And there are various ways of making it inclusive. Language also is a very important element of that. your captions that you are creating, you are writing, and because you already have it written, you can easily transfer it to the digital medium, and then it becomes more user friendly. It's also like who has the access to it, like the question on digital space is also that, like, or how easy is it to use that, like how easy is it to navigate your website. So if you have designed a game or something, like, can anyone just download it and play, if they don't have internet or they need internet throughout to use that groups. We also worked with some of the museums which were not very big on their budgets, but they were really keen on, doing something during the times of COVID. And we created WhatsApp groups for them, and they would put up activities, they would put up things, and that gives us an idea that, if you want to reach out to the audience, you want your outreach to be more inclusive and diverse, then you will find ways of doing it. And I think so these are certain things that if they consider in their planning, it just becomes easier, that they know what they're reaching out for, and also who their target audience is,
Right.
who are they designing for. That is also quite important, because sometimes it's designed for a very learned audience, like your talks and all other things that are being recorded are recorded as if everybody understands the professional word, or they'll understand the academic word. There are
Right.
many people, I'm just going to put on the chat over here the word VERSO, like so many people struggle to just understand the word when this is put up like next to an artwork or something, like trying to even figure out what does it mean.
I don't know what it means.
It just means a rare side of an artwork.
Okay.
So imagine our it's like one professional writing in code language for another professional to understand.
Yeah.
And many, like we like imagine, like you work in the domain of art, culture, heritage, right? We see paintings day in day out, like, but certain terminology is not for everyone. Like, so if you are writing captions, and we've done multiple workshops or museums, only on caption writing, that
Right.
how do you write that description, and that caption writing then really helps you to write content for all text. There is another very interesting thing that anyone and everyone can do. एंड अगर आप सबके पास आपका फोन है तो आप उस पे जा सकते हैं ऑन योर इंस्टाग्राम. एंड इफ यू गो ऑन योर इंस्टाग्राम, प्लीज ओपन एनी इमेज, और if you, I'm just doing it here so I can tell you how you can do it. Any image that you have uploaded, you please click on that. On the right hand side corner you would see three dots, and when you click on those three dots, you will see a tab that opens and it reads edit. आप जैसे ही edit पे click करेंगे, on the right hand side corner you would see something which reads as edit all text. And if you just click on that all text, it will read out to you that all text describes your photos for people with visual impairment. So if you put the all text over there, and also please understand that all text is not the caption of the picture. It is a description of the picture. It is a description of the thing that you're putting up, and it is completely upon the organization how much do you want to describe of an object. You could only say that this is a cup from Egyptian period. You can leave it there. You could give the details of some hieroglyphics, what is the form, kya color hai. Sometimes we avoid using the color because color would not be the right way of writing an alt text, because for those who are born blind, it becomes a challenge to even understand or recognize a concept that does not exist.
Right.
So that is where there is a way of even writing down these kind of content over there.
Right.
So though it may seem simple, and a lot of people ask us that, but इसमें तो क्या बड़ा बात है, आप तो खाली ramp लगाते हो, मतलब इसमें क्या है? But they don't understand the fact that it is not only about putting the ramp or vetting their content, but it is also about creating a cycle of chain reactions that would come along with that, making sure that the customer's journey, the visitor's journey, online or offline, is smooth, experiential, and accessible.
Right.
So that is what we do.
So, in India, accessibility and inclusion to cultural spaces receives the least attention in the hierarchy of needs benchmark for citizens. I mean, for general citizens to begin with, and persons with disability even more, I think. So how do we sort of bring in that change with respect to, attitude, from policymakers to institutional people to institutions to general public to actually adopt these kind of practices? I mean, your experience, has there something come up?
Yeah, this has been a question. I was once being interviewed on national television, and the reporter once asked me that, in a country where people struggle, and please understand the line, it's a very interesting line, where in a country where people struggle for day-to-day existence, why is your focus on aesthetics? And that, I thought that was an important question to answer, because that the purpose of life is not only to exist, right? It is also to live. It does not mean that if I am only working on museums, I should also I should first look at making the roads accessible and then bringing them there. I think it has to work in parallel. It is not that I can sequentialize existence or aesthetics of life.
Yeah.
Art, culture, heritage plays such an important role in our life that we may not even understand with, like when you look at, just look at the genesis of an arts-based therapy, you will find that a lot of ways in which we engage with our culture, the kind of things that we do, we kind of incorporate that pedagogy of, of interacting, creative expressionism, or representing your own self. And that is the power of our culture. It allows us to be our own selves. And I think if that thing is made more inclusive, that is made more accessible, one also finds it interesting and useful in various elements of life. And that sometimes is a completely intangible experience. You can't quantify it. It is a qualitative experience altogether.
Right.
So this question does keep on coming, that, what gets the higher side of the attention, is it the aesthetics or the existence of life? But I think it is a balance, and it has to happen in parallel, because in that case, and we had come across a very interesting research that, so I also, during COVID, I equipped myself with the knowledge of working with pedagogical oncology teams, like working with children who were like cancer patients, and how do you work with them using art and heritage and culture in different elements. And there was a very interesting question that came up at that point in time, was that should children who are terminally ill study? And that is a very poignant question, because it asks us to pause and say that, okay, we study because we know that we are going to use this somewhere. And when you know that there is a certain time period where the clock is ticking, does then education, the way we are receiving it, make any difference, or should there be an alternative way of experiencing life? So I think this question falls in that realm, where it's an experience for everyone and anyone to be a part of it.
Right. So we did some research, and it came up that in 2017, ICOM Russia implemented the Inclusive Museum project that was aimed at assisting museums in creating an environment that is equal and accessible to all. Is there a need for a similar kind of project in India to solve issues of accessibility, or do you think India is too vast and diverse a region where you can have a central policy to help us?
The answer is yes and no. Okay. I will go with the yes, the important one. Why is it necessary for us to have something like this? Is because accessibility to culture and inclusion to our cultural heritage is our right, is everyone's right. It is not that if I'm an able-bodied person, I should have access to going and seeing some of the most beautiful monuments that we have in our country. But it is a right of every citizen to be there, like to go there and enjoy that. And I would say that, I don't see the diversity of a country as a hindrance, because I think we all have our own way of including people. Our own ways of inclusion are very, very central in our cultural context, Just pick up the concept of a Rath Yatra, any Rath Yatra, the procession where the god comes out and goes around the town, or goes around or circumambulates the temple, is also in a very interesting way a concept of accessibility, where the god comes out, moves around, and rather than people going to the god is moving closer to you, and you have that level of access. So incorporating accessibility into the space, I don't see it as a challenge. But yeah, this has to be a there has to be a conscious effort of doing it. One of the biggest reasons why I particularly feel that, there has been some hindrance of going about doing this, or like, some hindrance about why people don't actually think about it in conceptualization, is that one, there is a huge lack of awareness. And I have a picture which would amuse everyone. I'm just going to show you all. And this picture was actually clicked on site. It was, this is one of the tourism departments of our country, and we were working with them. We gave them a list of requirements, and we told them that the ramp that you are creating will be a stepped ramp. And they said, okay, we will do it. They did some decent work. They, created a ramp of a decent gradient which was there. And they, just the day prior to our visit, they realized sir ne to bola tha ki stepped ramp banana. This is what they did.
Oh no.
Just, and this is a very fresh image from that. Like, so ideally a stepped ramp would mean a ramp, a landing, and a ramp leading to the surface, so that one can easily go up there. And so this is what they ended up doing. Like, they kind of chopped off.
Oh no.
आगे, क्योंकि सर आपने स्टेप डालने को बोला था, हमने डाल दिया, ये अभी तो सूख जाएगा, फिर हम इसको बराबर से टाइलिंग कर देंगे.
Oh no. Yeah.
So this is the lack of awareness that is there in our country. Like this is a level of understanding of accessibility in a country where somebody else has to tell you what needs to be done. It is a concept of logical reasoning that which we don't sadly apply. And I think if this happens, we will have museums that are more accessible. I would be for organizations, leading organizations who govern certain practices of our space, to actually advocate for this. And like, we've been working with various different groups, we've been doing workshops, we do training programs and all, but that's not it. Right? There has to be so many different ways in which you can be inclusive and accessible.
Right.
So, and it's always also a chicken and egg situation. For whom should we do it? Because audiences don't come in, and audiences have that we don't go there because there's nothing for us. As much as it is a duty of the museum, I think it is a duty of the audiences also to ask for it. Right. Sadly, in our country, we don't even take a simple feedback form seriously. Access for All is very happy to say this, that we had filled in one form for a airport which had only diaper changing station in the female toilet and not in the male toilet. And we were like, that's not right. Like, that should be there. And we received a fantastic reply from them saying that we would be happy to put in, but the icon on the diaper changing station is that of a female changing a diaper of a child. And that is where it goes down to. And they were like, we thought it is only for the female bathroom. So, and that is why, we are glad to see concepts like family rooms coming up in toilets in Mumbai. And also, these are live examples of understanding that why there should be a need for, somebody policing accessibility when it is a need for everyone,
Right.
Disability is not like it is not going to happen to you or me or anybody. Like, it could happen to anyone at any given point in time. Right now, I'm only face under because my leg is slightly affected, but it is difficult. Situational disability is a thing. Temporary disability is a thing. Like, it is not that easy. And these elements of accessibility would make life easier for you. I'm telling you, like, for me to get medical assistance became a task just because it was on the first floor.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of examples, like the Met Museum has a variety of resources and programs tailored to meet the needs of visitors with disabilities, such as those for blind or partially sighted, those with hearing impairments, and those with dementia and autism. Do you have any other interesting sort of examples that you could, tell us that we can,
Yeah, I think we in our country also we've been quite fortunate to do those programs, or at least initiate them in our country and start them. So starting with a program at the City Palace in Jaipur, where we created tactile artworks, and we would bring in groups from various different special needs schools to the museum. Then even like working with art galleries like DAG, with for whom we designed a program called Abhas, tactile art, making visual art accessible for the visually impaired groups, and conducting various different programs, creating braille books, creating such a lot of things, and even like organizations like KCC, Kolkata Center for Creativity and all, where they have commissioned us to create braille books, tactile artworks, creating content in various different accessible languages. We created a lot of programs for children with autism, for temporary exhibitions, and even like organizations like Sarmaya, or like which had a digital presence but not a physical presence, but they did some fantastic work. So I think across the spectrum we have been doing things for art festivals, India Art Fest, Serendipity Arts Festival, Kochi Art Biennale. So I think programming is something that our museums do in a very, very good way. I think they have an interesting approach to it. So be it India Music Experience in Bangalore, MAP, like National Museum, IGNCA, so CSMVS, Baudaji Lad. So I think programming in that way, and also see the museums find it easier to do that because it's one program,
Right.
and it is a low risk kind of a thing, that and it's a good way of also trying out whether it is working out or not, and hence this becomes an easier approach to start with, and then they get more they become more inclusive and try to incorporate other things. So I think that's an area where you can make people more confident. We've been doing some really interesting work with the tourism industry, where we are looking at various leaders of in the tourism space and trying to see how tourism can be made more accessible. Yesterday was World Tourism Day, and the concept was about relooking places and people, and like how you make sure that like you can make spaces accessible. You make even like a simple thing, that the journey, like it is not only the monument, but how do you reach the monument? Do you have the right mode of transport? Do you have an accessible mode of transport? Do you have accommodation that is accessible or not? So I think those all aspects need to be covered, as it is a network of things, not only one space.
Absolutely. I think that's what we're also trying to do. We're also trying to like trigger these conversations around museums. In fact, our culture also works on a few products, and one of the key things that we want people to do is touch, museum collections. So we create artifact replicas for the civilization, because the do not touch in museums is so against the entire tactile experience of things, even for people without disability. Then with people with disability would sort of
For sure. For sure.
Like you were mentioning that the how you do not have people with disabilities in museum spaces as employees or as part of the team. Do you think as a discourse in this country, their voices have been heard? Are we including more individuals into conversations about making places accessible?
So what I have been observing is that in our country, we either follow a very charity-based approach, or we follow an activism-based approach, where we only demand or we just want to give, but nobody is finding that balance. And that is what we feel, that at Access for All, we are trying to do that. We're bridging that gap. We are trying to balance out what kind of activism is required to nurture that change, and what kind of requirement should be fulfilled, and how we can bring those funds. And also we try to work with CSR projects. We try to raise funds for organizations through various different programs, and I think that way one can find a balance. And we've been doing that with the individuals, with groups, with various different stakeholders in this setup. It's not only the individuals, but also, like, say for example, we had this discussion in one of the blind schools in Bombay while we were doing a program with them, and they said that भैया हमारे पास में 15 cane sticks है, and they like we only need one, and I was like 15 क्यों है? कोई भी आता है तो हमको cane stick gift करते हैं, कोई भी organization आते तो cane, मतलब मुझे समझ में नहीं आता, उनको ऐसा लगता है कि हम तोड़ देते हैं इन चीजों को. and that was such an important point, and that is where we started creating CSR management plans, where we told organizations that, okay, listen, these are the requirements of the space, or of this organization. Like, At some point, we did that with Sahapedia also when we were working with them. We told them that we'll create the Anubhuti program that we created for those people with special needs was catered to that context, that if we are going to South, we'll take the context of North, or, if you're going to some other place, we'll bring that context in, and not just tell somebody who's in Kerala only about the Kathakali dancers and all, but actually take that to Jaipur, and in Kerala or in Delhi, when we were doing it, we would talk about block printing or like other elements of that. So
Right.
creating that cross-pollination of information is also making it inclusive, right?
Right, absolutely. So I think we can open up the floor for a few questions in case anyone has. But other than that, you recently went to the British Museum as a fellow, right? Could you tell us a bit about that experience while we ask for a few questions from the audience?
So I think there the idea was, because currently I'm also consulting British Council, and we've been is there no audio? Hello?
I think right now it's okay.
Yeah, I have. So the Azan is on. So
Yeah.
that is why you have the ambient sound of it. And I think that's the beauty of a country, right? Like at certain point, that does not even affect us. Like initially, when we were doing a Zoom call like that, used to be sab band karke kaam karne baito, and now it is about normalizing these things, right? And I think that's the crux, and I really appreciate Manoj for bringing that up. That we really have to normalize things, normalize the context of that. अगर कोई म्यूजियम में आना चाहता है, हम जब भी tactile, when we made these tactile artworks, this one group of blind students, after touching and after the experience, they said that thank you so much for their experience, but मेरे को ज़्यादा मन नहीं है history में, मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगता है. And see, that is the time we realize that we take a position of that space that हमने बनाया तो आपको आना ही चाहिए. We don't do that you decide. And I think that is where we have to normalize non-participation also.
Yeah.
And I think that is one thing, like circling it back to my experience at British Museum. I think in museums over there, I've never, like, imagine there are people who would just lie down in one of the corners in a museum, like, or just leisurely walk around in the space. There was a school group that came only to see one artwork. Like imagine that in India. I have seen people where they would rush, जैसे कि वो local train में भागने वाले. मतलब वो देखते भी नहीं है, वो सबसे पहले उनको कॉरिडोर में लाया जाए. And I would see that when I was working at the City Palace, Jaipur, they would bring them there. The tour coordinator or the teacher would say, बाथरूम उधर पीछे है, पानी भरने के लिए उधर है, 10 मिनट में पूरा म्यूजियम देख के बाहर आना है. 10 minutes for a museum, such a fantastic museum like City Palace, like City Palace Jaipur, where there's so much to learn. And when you go to these museums, you see that there are people who are coming in with an idea of what they want to take from this. And I think that's another reason where also it is about the ticketing, right? I think ticketing also is a very important element of accessibility.
Right.
There was this one discussion that I was having with, because I also teach, and we were having at NID in Ahmedabad. I was teaching a group of exhibition design students, and they came up with a very interesting point that, how a ticket plays an important role in seeing the museum and the fatigue that you bring along with that.
Okay.
And they are like कि हमको मालूम है अगर हम दिल्ली जा रहे हैं हमको नेशनल म्यूजियम पूरा एक दिन में खत्म कर लेना है. Imagine, and that FOMO of missing out on, like नहीं देखा तो, like ये नहीं हुआ तो, and सब कुछ देख लेना है, but थकावट भी हो रही है, बैठना भी नहीं है, कैफे में भी नहीं जाना है क्योंकि सब खत्म करना है. And imagine if we start having tickets in our country where you could use it for 2 days, you could use it over 3 days, and then people would go to those spaces, like making it open for free.
Or memberships.
Or memberships, yeah. So I think that construct becomes an important one for ease of access, and access is not only about disability, it goes way beyond. It goes into making sure that how you, me, and anybody else interacts in that space.
Absolutely. Even, we will try to make content more accessible, for example. We decided to create an app which is looking at content which is already there, which is super academic and scholarly about heritage, and making it in bite-sized, heritage tidbit format, so that people who
get something out of it, Even since you all are recording this, and I know that this is your first or second talk, like maybe for other talks, it would be fantastic to have even a sign language interpreter, you know.
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
even like while you have this recording, you can let us know. We'll be more than happy to make it sign language enabled for you all. Because in that way you also reach out. That's the question, you know. People are like, आते ही नहीं है लोग, but अगर sign language होता तो और लोग आते. So that is the thing. Like you provide the right infrastructure and people will come in. You know.
Yeah.
I always cite the example because I feel that Bangalore Airport does it in the most fantastic way. Bangalore Airport will like the middle corridor has is a flight of staircase, has an elevator, has an escalator. It is for the traveler to decide whether they want to use any of that depending on their ability. You want to stroll around, you can walk up. There is somebody who wants to rush, wants to use an escalator, elevate. So you are free to make a choice, and I think that is what accessibility is about. That is the sensitivity of the accessibility, where you make it more user centric rather than the organization centric.
Absolutely.
I think there's a question.
Yes, we have a question from Masoom. What action apart from awareness are urgently needed to promote accessibility in museums?
Hiring people with disability as part of your staff.
Right.
Having gender balance in the museum staff. Like I'm being very honest about this, but I see very few male members working in the education team. And every time I would go in there, I just feel that and it is a huge gender imbalance rather, I feel, you know, it is. So looking at not only through the aspect of disability, but there are so many different ways of bringing that balance inside, you know. A lot of times I've tried to do that. Like I break my discussion into like Hindi and English because I think language is a second barrier that needs to be considered. So I think if these are things that are brought up in a museum space, you actually make them more inclusive. You just make them more familiar for people to be a part of.
Right. Absolutely. I think Nayab wants to ask a question. Please go ahead.
Hi, yes. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Okay. So my name is Nair. I'm an interior design student. I'm currently in my 4th year, and I'm doing my dissertation on interactive museums. So that's the whole reason why I joined this meeting. So if you don't mind, I would like to, like, my research paper basically concentrates on interactive displays. Like, you know, you have your displays that you can actually touch and feel. So I wanted to know that while designing these displays, these interactive displays, how do you consider accessibility and inclusivity? Like, yeah, so if you could like talk about that, that would be great.
Sure, definitely. I think that's a very interesting point because a lot of museums are bringing in the element of digital interfaces, and through mediums that you can touch, you can understand things. So I would, again, like this is a long discussion, but like to give you 3 simple steps. One is that provide for language input, like various different languages that one can use. You can also look at different ways of controlling touch. Like you may also have to consider that what happens if somebody has a missing limb, or if somebody is using the prosthetic, would your interface have the user interface of the prosthetic arm also, like the fingertip, so that it can touch that and it would allow it to move? Or like, you know, if there was any other format of using it, there are applications that are also working on the way we move our eyeballs. They kind of move around in those aspects. So you may have to look at that. And third thing is that how do you design your UI UX of the application? You know, your UI, which is your user interface and user experience that you're trying to create. You should not have, you know, things that are just going all over the place. Like either it follows up and down movement or it follows left and right. If your screen is rectangular in its landscape, then there would be a different way of approaching it. If your screen is, you know, portrait, then there is a different way, because then I should also be able to stand at ease and then use my screen. Is it only for single user or it's for a double user? And while you are doing this, you should definitely look up the India Music Experience, because I think they have some fantastic digital interactive displays over there, where there are many people who can work, who can do things together. And we've done their accessibility audits, and like it's been really interesting to see the work that they have in that space.
Right. So I even wanted to ask that when these interactive displays come to place, there are also displays that are like they use really less technology. Like sometimes you have those journal prompts where like when you're leaving an exhibition, they tell you to write for your thoughts or something. So like, do you think that even inclusivity should play a role in designing those, like something low tech as well?
No, of course, of course. As I mentioned while she was asking me the question, and she was asking me the question about digital interfaces, and as I
Right,
said
right.
that going low tech is extremely important because one, that means that you are assuming that everybody knows how to use digital interfaces. Second, there is no orientation. Like half of the time, people are trying to figure out kahan pe kya press karna hai. I would
Yeah.
say like do look up this. There is a fantastic book by Don Norman called The Design of Everyday Things, and it
Okay.
talks
All right.
about a fantastic idea of if feedback. Like I'm just trying to look for something that I can show you that has a feedback. But yeah, so say for example, my this watch which is there, right? When I put this like
Right.
this, like I don't know if you know whether अब ये बंद हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ है हमको नहीं मालूम है but
Huh.
as soon as you hear this that tuck sound which is there that comes when you close this particular ये जो टक आवाज आता है हम बॉल पेन को भी जब ये बंद करते that tuck sound gives you the feedback that the work is done. I think that elements of interaction with an object gives you an idea of how to make it more inclusive. So you can definitely look at that, and otherwise I'll also put down my information. Just feel free to reach out and we'll be more than happy to help.
All right, sir. That's so sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think this has been great, and I will get in touch with you so that we can have, an interface which makes our talks, our social media, everything more accessible. Thanks once again for joining me.
Thank you so much. And anyone, if you all have ever any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to us. I've put in my details here, and but otherwise we are available at any point in time. Like also we've been creating different kinds of checklists and things for a low tech use. So if you think that would be of any help, please feel free to let us know. And otherwise, I think social media is a great way of connecting.
Please also let us know on our Center for Museum social media what what your feedback is about our talks, what topics you would want us to explore, and what are things we need in our museum sector to be looked into. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you.